Hello YouTubers, I want to welcome you to another edition of Bargain Bin Amps. Now, as you know, I had been doing a series on bass sounds on guitar, and we had gone through bass amps, PA systems, crossovers, using a Electro Harmonix bass line, using octave pedals and so on. First, a little background. What about, I have a bass cabinet, okay, a Fender 115, we just did a video on it. For those who aren't subscribed, you should subscribe, because I reference a lot of old videos that I had done, and it's an easy way of finding those videos. So, with this bass cabinet, I was thinking, well, you know, what if I used just a power amp instead of a bass amp? Would it sound okay? I mean, or do I need a bass amp, right, to power this cabinet? I was quite curious about that. Now, of course, I didn't want to buy a bunch of power amps to find out. Right? Now, a little history. Unfortunately, one of my favorite music store for years, unfortunately closed. Okay? And I mean, they had to get everything out of there. And, you know, I think they had been there for 40 years or something, so of course stuff kind of piled up. Well, they basically called me up and said, hey, we've got a big stack of power amps, right? Now, some working, some not, who knows? Do you want them? I said, okay, yeah. Now, the thing they didn't tell me was that I basically had to load up my car and a van to get them, and my goodness, some of those were so heavy. I mean, over 100 pounds power amps, you know, huge, like the old PV CS 800s and things. In any case, but that was great. I mean, free of charge, that was super. And so I kind of went through them a little bit, and I still have a ton to do. You know, I don't know if eventually I'll sell them off or what have you, I don't know. You know, or if they even work. One of those that was included was a little tiny power amp, right? And it wasn't very heavy at all, but I thought, man, this is kind of cool, a little tiny deal. And I think it was like 65 watts or something like that. But now I'm not so sure, it may be more than that. Anyway, let's take a look at it. Alright, so here it is. Here's this little power amp. It's awesome. And here I've got it turned way down so I can talk over it. And what is it exactly? It's a QSC. It looks like it's a rack mount power amp. Okay, it's a QSC power amplifier 3.7. Whatever that is. It's a stereo power amp. A real simple one. It's got one volume control, but on the back it has two speaker inputs, two speaker outputs. Here we're only using one, and we're going into this big old Fender 115 bass cabinet. It's a 15-inch cabinet. Alright. So here I'm going to turn it up, but you're going to see it's probably going to rattle. But here we go. There you go. You can hear the rattling besides the walls. So hold on a second. Alright, so I've got taken it out of the bass cabinet. And there you can hear that there's no rattling. Here it is right here. And if I turn that up, now it's missing a knob obviously, but at kind of halfway point. Well, that sounds just great. And we can bring this up. Here's at 75%. And that's starting to rattle the windows and the walls and things. And if I max that out, here it is. Wow. That is big. And the little amp is quite small. Alright, let me turn this down. Probably need to clean up that knob a little bit. It's a little dirty. Because that's an oldie little power amp, but it works just fine. And some contact cleaner should be able to clean up that knob pretty well. And it needs a knob cover too. You know. Wow. And I'm only using one channel of it. Pretty cool little power amp. It's an oldie though, for sure. Rack mount. And you can see, if you take a look at it, I mean, that's not very big at all, is it? See that? Maybe that's why I like it so much. But it kind of rattles a little, especially when it's, you know, putting out those bass frequencies. By the way, I did a little bit of research on this power amp. It is actually a stereo power amp, and I found out a few things about it. Now, you know, it seems the information seems to vary from place to place. However, I have it on pretty good authority that this amp was made from 1979 to 1982. Now, can you imagine that, if you think about it? So it's 40 years old, if not more than that. You know, and I tell you, I hope that, you know, that my gear, when it gets 40 years old and pretty close to it, I hope it's still working. So this thing is really built like a beast, and is known to be super reliable. And I think the proof is there. I mean, that it's still working. Wow. For all I know, you know, Randy Rhoads, who sadly passed away in 1982, could have used one of these power amps, though he probably didn't. But anyway, and I've also read that they are highly reliable. And I was quite surprised to find that, at least in the past, a few people use these for bass rigs, to power bass amps. And supposedly it has a limiter in it. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but they said it was very good for bass. Anyway, so, you know, who knows? But people did use these for bass amps. Quite surprising. On top of that, here's what I've tried to find out. Okay, it's called the 3.7 power amplifier. Why, I don't know. I thought it was because it was a Series 3 amplifier. And there is a manual online for Series 3 QSC power amps. However, for amps that were in the Series 3 but made later, because it didn't include any information on the 3.7. However, I saw opinions saying, they're built like a rock, and very, very reliable. And the proof is this thing's still working. If it was really made between 1979 and 1982, and in 2022 it's still working, that's amazing. Now, here's the thing. Real quick on the power. Okay? I read that it was 150 watts at 4 ohms. And keep in mind that it's stereo. And so I saw elsewhere that it was 90 watts for each channel, which would be 180 watts at 4 ohms, I believe. So I don't know who's right, who's wrong. Basically, as far as I can tell, it's pretty close to 100 watts. Now, it could be even less than 100 watts, but pretty close anyway. Per channel, and I'm only using one channel here. Right? So I guess if you had another bass cabinet, you could run 2 cabinets. And so it's actually a pretty cool little amp. I'm just stunned. It is quite old, and I knew it was quite old. Now, here strangely, I saw another model that looked very similar, but it had 2 volume controls. This one only has 1, so I mean, this is the original oldie, you know. Plus the other one with the 2 knobs didn't say power amplifier 3.7, you know. And then I saw an ad of somebody selling one a long time ago and saying that they had toured with it with all these different bands and things. You know, they had opened up for a bunch of bands. So, I mean, this is a pretty cool little amp. You know, I don't really have the exact wattage, right? But you might gotta remember the Fender is running at 8 ohms instead of 4, right? So the power rating is going to be different, you know, because when they say at 4 ohm, it's going to be less at 8 ohm. That's why they would say, for example, these little Class D amps, you know, it's 200 watts. Well, yeah, at 4 ohms, but at 8 ohms, it's only 130. Well, it's kind of the same thing here. So, but I'll tell you what, I mean, you heard it. I think it's quite loud. You know, definitely loud enough for my purposes. Okay, so anyway, there's a little more information on the QSC 3.7 power amplifier, right? Which I am very happy with. Now I'm gonna have to find a little knob. I saw the original knob cover in a little volume, and it's just a little silver knob. You know, I think what I'll do is, well, I have some really old, like, stereo equipment, and I'm sure I've got some, a couple that don't work, and I'll just pull a knob off of that and put it on there, see if it works. Luckily for me, you know, the half of the potentiometer is still sticking out, so a knob would fit in there perfectly. You know, so it really, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just the knob is missing. The knob cover, if you like. Okay. So there you go. I mean, basically, it's 100 watts, or probably a little less. But that's per channel, and I didn't realize that. I don't know why I thought it was mono. I think I thought it was mono because it only had 1 volume. No, but it's actually a stereo amplifier. How cool is that? You know, so you could use that with a couple PA speakers or a couple bass amps, whatever. Or I'm sorry, bass cabinets. In this case, I'm only running it in mono. You know, it would be cool if you could bridge the 2 channels, but I didn't see that capability there at all. Pretty cool for an amp from 1979 to 1982 is when they were built, if you can imagine. Man, that's just crazy. So I went ahead and tried it. Now here I'm going to play through this power amp, right, into a bass cabinet, the Fender 115 bass cab. And here's just regular guitar, you know. Okay, now I'm going to turn on my Electro-Harmonix Bass 9. And remember, this isn't going through a bass amp, it's going through just the power amp, like you would find in a PA, for example. Let's try that. And you can hear it's real convincing, I think. So, for example, you just loop that, right? That kind of... really does sound like a bass. I mean, but my goodness, does that not sound like a bass? It does to me. And that's without a bass amp, just the power amp section. I found that the difference between a power amp and a bass amp is, of course, you don't have the controls as far as the tone controls, at least not on these power amps. And things like compression and, compressor limiter or something like that you would find on a bass amp. As a result, what I found is it's a little different sounding, and that's very clean. As would be expected. Now, with the Electro Harmonics Bass 9, I mean, the bass sound really comes through. Very much so, Whereas kind of the bass amp, it kind of colors the sound a little bit. Now possibly, preferably a bass amp would probably be better. But at what cost? Now, something interesting are these little Class D bass head power amps, right? And they're really inexpensive. They're like $200 or somewhere in there, give or take, and there's one by TC Electronics, there's another one called the Gnome, one called the Elf, the Trace Elliott Elf, and so on. Little Class D amplifiers. And those could be really cool, too. In any case, what we have to deal with was this little mono power amp, and I think it sounds great, especially since it didn't cost anything. I really like it for some reason. I don't know why, but it's really cool, I think. Because it's kind of old, granted, and it's mono, which is very strange, too. Now, one thing I did notice is if you put the power amp directly on the bass cabinet and you turn up that power amp, right, and the bass cabinet is hitting all those low frequencies, it starts to rattle. Right? The actual power amp section, I don't know if that's just the way it's built or not, or, maybe I'll try and tighten the screws, but they seem pretty tight, so I don't know. However, when you take it off the bass amp, then there's no rattle, of course. What I was really surprised about is that this little tiny power amp was enough to rattle the walls, very much like the Hartkey HD150 combo amp that I have over here, which is really loud and, can basically destroy these walls. I mean, it's a beast. Very interesting. Anyway, something to think about. But I have to say, I wasn't really disappointed in the sound at all. So basically, if you're ever in need of a bass amp and you don't have one, but you'd have a little power amp or something, it could be a good substitute, for powering a bass cabinet or a PA cabinet, if you like. Very interesting. So in other words, you have a lot of different options, I found. So quite pleased. And I don't know why, but I really like the little mono, older than dirt little power amp. And I was quite surprised by the volume of it. You know, now granted, you've got to turn it up to like at least 75%, if not higher, if not maxed out, to get a really big bass sound, you know, because it's not all that powerful. But my goodness, some of these power amps I was given here, right, are like huge. I mean, freaking, you know, 800 watts, 1,000 watts, and so on, so on, so on. You know, so this is just a little tiny, you know, baby, I think, yeah, less than 100 watt power amp. And I'm going to double check that, because it seems like for 65 watts it's awfully loud. You know, because I have that, remember the Dean bass? There's another video I've done on it. It was another bass amp, and it was only 40 watt. And the power amp, I think, is louder, really. Very interesting. Yeah. But in the meantime, I'm going to have a lot of fun, I think, playing with just through that power amp, you know. If I can keep the rattling down. And I was really concerned that it was the Fender cabinet. And I go, man, maybe this cabinet's sad, you know, but that's not the case, because the rattle's not coming from the cabinet. It's causing the rattle, but it's that little power amp for some reason, you know. So I'll see if I can fix that somehow. You know, one thing, taking it off the actual bass cabinet, you know, where it's getting all those vibrations and things, makes a huge difference, you know. And probably, my guess is probably some foam, you know, under it would probably take care of it, because it would decouple it from the vibration of the cabinet. Maybe that should be another video for some other time. Alright, so anyway, there you go. So, conclusion, you can use just a straight power amp as a bass amp, interestingly enough. Alright, very good. See you next time. Okay, bye.